Hello, I hope you've been doing well. My name is Lalaluneat of Moonfish Ghost and welcome to another one of my Speedpaint videos. Today, I'll be sharing the process behind how I made this month's digital phone wallpaper for my supporters on Ko-fi. Each month, I usually draw around a central theme, and for July's rewards, I had a request to draw an AU of Chuya from Bungo Stray Dogs as a dragon prince. Personally, this has really piqued my interest, and I'm finding that I've been having a great time learning how to draw dragons and just figuring out more about the outfits that they can wear in the world building. I think probably even after I finish all the rewards, I'll most definitely go back to doodling and sketching about this AU in the future whenever I have the time. So really, thank you so much to the supporter who gave this recommendation. So for this month's wallpaper, I've decided to place more of an emphasis on using line work and more of solid colors and minimal shading this time around. I really wanted to bring more focus to all the dragons and all the details on the scales that you'll probably see later in this video. So I decided to just keep all of the rendering down to as minimum amount as possible. Probably at most just simple gradation and stuff, but I personally just really wanted to place more of an emphasis on that. You can see right now I am using a textured, just a simple textured pencil that comes with Procreate. I tend to prefer using textured brushes since it helps create more dynamic drawings, especially when I do primarily line art for a drawing. For rendering, I use a completely different method where I'm using a rounded soft brush instead that has completely different characteristics. But with rendering, I find that I can be a bit more looser and freer in how I draw. Whereas with a line art drawing, I find that using a textured pencil brush helps achieve the same level of quality as my rendered drawings, but within a more structured method. Now, one thing that's a bit different compared to my previous Speedpaint videos is that before I start the sketch, I place a light grid in the background. It's a new method that I've recently discovered another artist using, and it made me really curious to want to try it for myself. Now, I have to say, after testing it for roughly maybe the past month and a half, I find that it's worked very, very nicely for me. It's clicked with my brain really well. I find that I'm able to visually catch more details that otherwise I would have missed on just a blank page, or it would have taken me a bit longer to see what's wrong. For example, having a grid as a point of reference has helped me greatly with fixing up proportions and with getting a better grasp of the scale of all the objects or characters on the page placed in relation to each other. I'm also able to see everything more clearly compositionally and work towards developing what will look more pleasing to the eye. As a side note, I should have realized long ago that using a grid probably would have helped me greatly in my drawing process. For those of you that might not know, I am very much a planner girly. I love using planners and definitely cannot live without them. I am the kind of person that I really love testing out planner systems. It's very much a hobby at this point. I like collecting washi tapes, I like collecting stickers to decorate my layout, and basically I cannot function without a planner. One crucial detail when I'm testing out all different planner systems is that it must have a grid layout. I cannot function otherwise. And I should have, again, realized that sooner, that the same could be applied to one I draw. So for those that feel like they've reached an art block of sorts, for the ones who feel like their art isn't coming out the way that it's used to or the way that they're envisioning in their minds, for those that feel like they've hit an art rut of some sort, here's a little bit of advice from someone who's most definitely encountered the same obstacles that you have faced in your art journey. Try something new and something that's not usually part of your creating process. For example, if you are a digital artist, maybe you can try and work with graphite pencils or colored pencils instead, or even work with mediums such as paint, like wash or watercolor. You can pick a different subject to draw. If you're someone that draws a lot of like characters or figure drawing, you can maybe choose to draw animals or inanimate objects instead, or even flowers, for example. On a related note, you can even go back to your roots, your foundations, and do practices such as like gesture drawing, figure drawing, still life object studies, painting studies, just so that you don't have to focus on conceptualizing the idea of the art and can just like focus on the technique and repetitive motion to develop your skill to the point that you want it to be in your art journey. Even the littlest changes, such as changing the type of brushes that you regularly use, can help you go a long way towards overcoming your art block. And while this isn't a guarantee that will keep you from encountering art blocks again, since you most certainly will as you grow and develop your style as an artist, you'll at least have more options in how to tackle your art block when you encounter it again in the future. So, back to what we were working on, since I know we went a bit off topic for a bit there. Right now, since all the figures have been drawn, all the characters have been drawn, I am now adding more details to the line art, adding more hatch lines to the scales on the dragon, just to give the impression that the dragon is very much real. Its scales are very sturdy, very sharp, and very rough. Adding details to the dragon in the background also helps to visually separate the dragon from Chuya, who's more in the foreground. It'll help you kind of make better distinctions between the two once everything is colored. Following that similar guideline, the baby dragon at the front, while detailed, isn't as detailed as the adult dragon in the back with all of the hatches and stuff. Instead, I'm using the baby dragon's size, shape, and colors to be what helps distinguish itself from Chuya. So now, after I reach the point where I'm pretty satisfied with the way the line art is, I start adding the base color. Since I'm using Procreate, I am manually coloring everything in, which is one of the most relaxing steps in the process for me personally. As I mentioned earlier, since the focus of this piece is on the line art, there will be minimal rendering and shading involved. The bulk of the work at this part of the process instead will primarily be adding the base colors in for everything. However, if you'd like to see more about my rendering and painting process, you can watch my other videos on my YouTube channel. I will link to some of the videos here on the screen or down in the description below. If you're interested or if you'd like to learn more, feel free to check them out. So now at this point, I'm coloring in the smoke for this drawing. It's not smoke in the traditional sense, it's very heavily stylized, but I noticed that when I draw smoke, this is usually what I tend to veer towards, heavily stylized smoke. It's wispy, it feels a lot more solid, ribbon-like to a degree. I really wanted to show that even though there's no fire from the dragon visible in the drawing, there's still remnants or proof that this dragon is a fire-breathing dragon and not a being that you can take lightly. Now we're at the point where we can add more details to everything and further refine all of the parts. I'll usually do things like adding blush to the skin, to the ears. I'll even recolor parts of the line art to see what will fit better with the overall drawing. I'm approaching this drawing more as a cell shading piece rather than a fully rendered piece. So that means just really like solid color blocking for the shadows. There's not really any blending involved. If there is, it's more of using a textured brush with light gradation. As you saw me just now, I was using the Bonobo chalk brush, which should be a part of the default brush set given in Procreate. It's really speckly for a brush, so I really like to use it usually on my flat pieces when I just want to add more like volume to certain details, usually with the hair. Sometimes the clothing, it depends on the type of clothing that I'm drawing. As you can see, I'm just adding really minimal like shading to the outfit in 1 or 2 places, nowhere else. But then that's also because later down the line, near the final stages, I'm gonna revisit this and add more shadows to the entire drawing as a whole. I want to keep it minimal right now so that I'm able to revisit that later. Right now, I'm adding details to the smoke. This is to make it a bit more wispier, a bit more translucent looking, more ethereal. I'm adding just a bit of a lighter bluish highlight to the smoke so that it like contrasts and stands out from the warm gray of the base of the smoke, readjusting how the smoke looks as a whole. Going back to refine the hair again, like adding a 3rd level of shading so that it can kind of stand out a bit more. You can see at this point that I'm constantly zooming in and out to see the full drawing and to make any changes, see how everything goes and works together. I'm adding even more fine details to everything. I am at this point though, drawing above the line art layer. I'm not erasing anything, I'm just coloring above the line art. It's to pull both the base colors and the line art together. I'm also adding some small details that I forgot in the initial sketching stage, such as the earring. Once I see the shading for Chuya is at a pretty decent spot, I stop there for now and focus on the dragons. I adjust some of the base colors. I make the big dragon at the back a bit more darker so that they blend in more with the background. I add in some soft shading, not as much as my rendering again, but just some basic like 1 or 2 color shading. I am using a soft brown brush at this point. I think sometimes a soft airbrush if need be, depending on the area that I need to cover. Since there is so much line art and like hatching on the dragon, I don't really need to do too much shading actually, just like figuring out areas of shadow and areas of light just to make it so that the dragon can be noticeable and can stand out. I am using effect layers at this point for some of them too. I am using layers such as the multiply layer, the soft light layer, the hard light layer, even like the overlay layer. It's all with the purpose to make the eye of the dragon stand out and for people to realize that there is a really large dragon in the background. I made the pupil color dodge layer so that it can be really saturated, really red. I'm adding bits of highlights to the horns, to the scales. I even last minute decide to add bits of like the ember or residual flames left behind by the dragon. All of these details are meant to kind of bring the viewer's eye back to the dragon's eye, which is why I make the dragon's eye the brightest it can be, the most saturated it can be. Add a bit of glossiness, just even add more highlights to the scales surrounding the eye, the reflection from the flames itself, that you'll catch it lurking in the background. And once I see that the dragon is at a good enough spot, I start adding the shadows to basically the overall picture just to get the mood. I set a layer to multiply for Chuya, make it reddish orange to kind of like fit in with the flames. I make it so that his outfit is basically, you cannot really see much, which is why I said earlier I didn't put that many details since I wasn't so sure how much would show up anyways. Once I see that looks decent, I start to focus on the baby dragon. The baby dragon won't be as detailed as the adult dragon. I want it to appear more fluffy than scaly, as you can see with all the Bonobo chalk brush being used, so that it looks fuzzier. I basically try to make it to look as cute and as fluffy as possible at this point in its life before it grows up into the terrifying adult dragon that we see here in the future. So now that we're at the stage where we're mostly focusing on finessing the baby dragon, I really wanted to jump in at this point and say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart to my supporters on Ko-fi. Ko-fi is a platform that lets you support your favorite creators, either through a one-time donation or by joining their memberships. Coffee is what allows me to keep on drawing these fun prompts each month and to be able to make them and physically mail them out to all my supporters as a thank you. I can honestly say that without the help of my coffee supporters all these years, I wouldn't have gone this far. If you'd like to join or be a part of Moonfish Ghost Coffee, feel free to check the link that I'll include down below. Again, thank you so much. Now we're at the final stage of the drawing, where I've added my shadows, I've adjusted my lighting, and now I'm doing some final color corrections. I am using the curves tool and the adjustments tool in Procreate, and I am adjusting the colors just to try and make everything fit together more cohesively, change my values, just make some slight color adjustments. I wanted to make everything just look a smidgen more red. It's a lot of trial and error at this point. Please let me know if you'd like to hear me talk more about how I use my curves and adjustments tool. I know they're not really talked about often in tutorials, so if you'd like for me to give a brief introduction to them, just let me know in the comments and I can always make another video about it. With these next few steps, I play around with the gradient map and ended up with a lovely shade of reddish purple. And once I figured that out, I used the noise filter and chromatic aberration for the finishing touches. And ta-da! We're done! Here's what the completed drawing looks like. Thank you so much to everyone who's watched this far. It really means a lot. If you enjoy what I make, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel for future videos. Again, thank you so much. Please take care everyone, and until next time. Bye bye!